perfect timing for Karl to switch on and talk about MEVA or rap about MEVA. I am very excited to see Karl make through his presentation in time. I will make a beeping sound if you cannot go through 169 pages in 15 minutes. Feel free to share screen.
You don't think I can do it? Wow. Okay, let's go. You're right. I'm not gonna lie. I will have a timer as well so that we can see. Anyway, why hello everybody. I am Karl, and today we are going to talk about MEVA, MEV auctions, also sequencer auctions, also just like generally what is this, what is MEV, like what can we do with it? And why is this extremely exciting, in my opinion, for just like literally the entire internet and the way that we work and communicate together? Because more things are communication problems than you might imagine. So anyway, first, why is this such an exciting topic? I think that the reason why this is such an exciting topic is because I love open source and blockchains, MEVA, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about how this works, but blockchains give a business model to open source. This is my claim. And I think that this is actually pretty accurate and pretty revolutionary. And in fact, blockchains give a business model to public goods in general, right? The ability for us to build things that aren't necessarily extractive, but instead get used. And when they are used, maybe you are rewarded in some way that doesn't incentivize you to hoard and whatnot. It's this beautiful future that we can potentially have. And I really do believe that it is possible. So, I've been working in this crypto space for a while. And guess what? I've, working on all these various projects. They're all open source and they're all public goods. And so there is this fundamental thing where it's like, okay, it's amazing to be able to work on this technology, give it out for free, et cetera, but how is this actually being funded? Like, I'm not gonna lie, I got paid for all of my work. I'm not just doing it out of the goodness of my heart alone, right? And I would say that a large portion of where this came from is just the fact that ETH itself got bigger and bigger, and the network effect grew and grew, and the price grew and grew, and then people started reinvesting, and it got bigger and bigger and just showered ETH on everybody, right? And that's like legitimately how all of these open source projects have been funded in, to some extent. And so, yay, blockchains gave a business model to public goods, these public goods that I was working on, and that many of us have been working on. So but it's like, is that really the business model? Like patronage, essentially from, or reinvestment into ETH. It's not terrible. I'm not going to say that it's like a bad thing, but it doesn't feel as sustainable long term. And so here's why it doesn't feel super sustainable. Because users, right, they have a bunch of, ETH and crypto, and they use dApps. And then those dApps essentially pay miners, because you end up spending a transaction fee. You end up getting, arbitrage profit taken from you, whatever it is. And then developers make these dApps, and they're just kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to deploy my smart contract, and now it exists. And now guess who's getting paid for it? It's not the developer, it's the miners, right? And so this is like a kind of like wacky scenario, and doesn't seem particularly sustainable. And I'm not saying that developers need to, make all of this cash, but this is an issue. Anyway, so the miners are making miner extractable value. And just imagine for one moment, imagine imagine that the miners had to actually pay the developers, right? That would be pretty sweet. And maybe what if miners literally paid everyone? What if we could all use the blockchain And guess what? The blockchain pays us back. That just seems like such a nice, like a kind of weird, like circular mindset and circular, strategy that just seems like a great basis for an economy, like every good economy is circular. Anyway, so, this is an amazing future. And then we can all join in universal consciousness as we're paying ourselves and being good. Okay. I'll take a step back. But anyway, let's get into some meat and potatoes. And talk about miner extractable values. So what exactly is MEV? I think that I think that this concept is probably a lot more normalized now, thankfully. But I will still define it. I think it's useful. Basically, it's the revenue from being a miner. So it includes the block rewards, it includes transaction fees, includes front running, includes slow market arbitrage, or there's probably a better word for that as well. But we often think of it as just front running because that's the thing that gets like a lot of attention, but really it's all of the above. It's literally what can be extracted from running a miner, right? And shout out to Phil Dine for introducing. And so there is another form of MEV, and that is just the miner extractable value that you can make from 51% attacking the network, being bad, all that kind of stuff. You don't be bad, okay? And so we make this assumption in blockchains that the MEV for being honest, basically the economic reward for being honest exceeds the economic reward for being malicious, right? So the miner is making money. What is keeping the miner from doing anything bad? Well, it's because it's making more money being good than it makes being bad. And that's great. But what happens if the MEV honest is actually way bigger than the MEV malicious, right? Like, and honest is a spectrum, right? Like if you're front running everybody, is that really honest? It's kind of like quasi honest. It's not necessarily, great. It's not pro social, pro us, pro community. It's more just like pro you. So like what this big MEV honest is not necessarily a good status quo. Why, like, we should just taper that down a little bit and give back to us, give back to the community. And so when MEV malicious is low, especially, proportionally to the MEV honest, and Casper and, consensus protocols that are a little bit more, have better security properties can actually achieve this, then we can extract that excess MEV, extract that miner extractable value. So that seems pretty fun. So now I'm going to talk about MEVA. So MEVA, notably, there's kind of like, it's a little bit of an ambiguous term at this point. So I'll try to make the distinction pretty clear. And we can, I'll go into it. But anyway, so these are the sources of MEV, and we're not going to talk about extracting the block rewards. We'll just talk about extracting the transaction fees, front running, slow market arbitrage. And by the way, I'm a big fan of the previous talk where we can actually eliminate much of front running just by using some, commit reveal / time lock crypto, which I'm very excited for. But anyway, here we are. These things we can extract. And that's a solid chunk of change, Okay, so first, gas auctions. We currently have, priority gas auctions. Flashbots is working on much more sophisticated kinds of auctions here, and those are, by the way, called MEVA as well. So I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a confusing term because there's a lot of auctions all over the place, and there are auctions for MEV all the time. So anyway, users or arbitrage bots or whomever are submitting transactions to the miner. The miner is about to create a new block. Sorry, I got to give a little bit more context here. The miner is creating a new block, figuring out what transactions go in it. And so how are they going to do this? Well, they're going to hold an auction. And that auction, you'll have the participants be either the users, arbitrage bots, flash bots, etc. And they will send these transactions, which express some, desired, inputs to be included in this block. And it'll, propose this modification. And it can be conditional. It can be arbitrarily complicated. It's very, it can be very interesting. And at a very simple level, the miner is going to choose the transactions that provide the most value to the miner, right? Pay the highest gas price, pay the highest fee. And so that is the transaction that is going to be mined, and that is the ordering of the transactions that will be mined, et cetera. And the miner will make that gas times the gas price. And so the MEV plus equals transaction fee, right? We just got some money from including transactions. So that's an MEV auction, and that is one sense of the term. And so I think I'm going to start disambiguating these terms a little bit and just call the next one a sequencer auction. And that's what I'm talking about when I say, like, extract the MEV. Let's talk about a sequencer auction. So the sources of MEV, right? We just got transaction fees, but now notably, this is, this also works for arbitrage, right? If there's a free arbitrage opportunity, everyone's going to be wanting to take advantage of it. They'll all be bidding, and they'll bid up to essentially how much money there is to be made. And so this is just to like give a feeling for how the miner actually makes the arbitrage opportunities in some kind of like perfectly competitive market situation. Now, MEV plus equals the arbitrage opportunity on the chain. That's pretty crazy. And I included this little Flashbots 2.0 diagram of these gas price auctions, because they bid each other up until pretty close to the value that they're going to make. Anyway. So those cover all of the other, sort of forms of MEV. And now let's talk about sequencer auctions. So miner, another word for miner, part of what a miner does is it sequences the transactions in a block. And so that sequencing is the thing that we're going to like focus on. And so I'll instead talk, right, they order these transactions. And so I'm going to actually just call it a sequencer, call the miners a sequencer. Sometimes I forget I have animations that describe what I'm saying, so then I have to play them back. Anyway, okay, so this is that auction that we just had, right? Users paying transaction fees, extracting MEV for I'm sending MEV, essentially transferring MEV to the sequencer. So what if we had an auction for being the sequencer itself? So let's hold an auction and let's say, okay, if you want to be a sequencer and you want to make this juicy profit, why don't you bid for that right, that privilege? Well, we can expect that the bids will be the expected MEV, gained minus the operational costs of being a sequencer. And guess where that money can go? First it was going to the sequencer. Where's this money going to? It's going to Facebook. We're going to send all the money to Facebook and Google and Amazon. No, I'm just kidding. Imagine a future where we send it to Ethereum, send it to us, send it to the community, send it to not just, the Ethereum community, everybody, right? Like, if everyone's going to be using this blockchain, it better be good for all of us. Build public goods. So, one thing that I'll just like point out, although I don't have that much time, so I'll just, mention it. One thing that we need to do for this to work is we need to have really good open source software that commoditizes being a sequencer, right? We want to make it so easy to extract the, MEV in the way that we want it to be extracted. So essentially, right, we may not want any front running to be possible. We may want to, require that all transactions are, encrypted and with commit reveal schemes and whatnot. Like that is something that we definitely want to do, but we need to commoditize being a sequencer for this MEV extraction to actually work and to be, something that doesn't get itself captured. And then, okay, I don't remember what that MEV greater than, okay. What's with this optimism? So that's what I'm working on, right? We're building optimistic rollup, the OVM, optimistic Ethereum. We are scaling Ethereum. I forgot to give that context in the beginning. It's very important. It's a very important project. So anyway, MEVAs, whoops, sorry about that, can be implemented on top of optimistic rollup. And we got a charter to enshrine public access to public goods. So that's pretty great. And MEVAs can fund public goods. In fact, they should fund public goods. And maybe they must fund public goods because we're not gonna, who is going to accept a future where blockchains aren't giving back to ourselves? So anyway, currently we're sad. let's make ourselves happy. You know, this might be sequencer auction. We can call it sequencer auction. Anyway, and then we'll fund tons of awesome public goods, give a business model to public goods. They're going to fund public goods. Blockchains will fund them. In fact, we will fund public goods. In fact, we will give back to ourselves. All right. This is what this is fundamentally about. You know, value is subjective. All this stuff is subjective. We're all just kind of like slurping around in a soup. We need a good, you know, non-extractive system. We want a little circle. We want that circular logic. That's what I'm all about. Just kidding. Great. Look at these rich people. Although I guess it's right here pretty centralized. You know, we gotta spread the money around a little bit more in my next image. Anyway, that's public goods funding. I don't know how to distribute the funds. You know, we've got Gitcoin grants and whatnot, but you know, I believe we can do it. Love knows no borders. And you know, thank y'all. That's Optimism. Check out Optimism. Check out Optimistic Ethereum. Check out you know, MEVA, and shout out to all these folks. That's me. I think I hit it. I think I hit the 15 minutes. I'm 11 seconds over. Let's go.
Yay, congratulations, Karl. Good job. Do we have any questions for Karl? No questions from ETH TV chat, but awesome presentation. I guess I have one, maybe questions, if there's no question. So I guess one option for redistribution is burn, right? And that's like the simple, equal redistribution to everyone. Like, what is your intuition in terms of how inefficient the burn is? Like, if we were to, you know, focus the money on specific projects, how much more can we get? How much more bang for the buck could we get?
Great question. So I think intuitively that there is value in having some sort of redistribution mechanism that is a little bit more complicated. The reason why I think this is the case is because we do currently redistribute, you know, a lot of value based on, you know, I work on some project, I'm like, you know, convince some venture capitalists to like pay me some money, and then I go out and I build my thing, and then it makes everyone a bunch of money. That's like a very sophisticated like money redistribution system. And I think that it gets, you know, it gets even more complicated. You introduce taxes, you introduce government subsidies, you know, all of these things. I think that it is just kind of the nature of the problem of like collective value and collective, you know, value distribution. It's essentially like a preference function on like what we as a, you know, human civilization like want. And so I just think that preference function is going to be quite complicated. And I'm not sure if there's like one distribution system to like rule them all, or if we can just do like, okay, this is a really simple one. Let's just like focus on that only. I think it's one of many.
So here's my kind of counter argument for the burn, basically just a simple burn. And like the first one is, you kind of mentioned it, is like, if you don't burn, then you have all sorts of questions around credible neutrality, right? So burn kind of gives you credible neutrality. I guess the other thing is that the burn, you know, is part of the ultrasound money thesis. You know, I keep shilling the ultrasound money thesis, but you know, there is a possibility that Ether will become, you know, in the same way that Ethereum could become the internet of money, ETH could become the money of the internet, you know, with tons of monetary premium. And if we focus on this one thing, the burn, then I think we have a higher chance of ETH becoming kind of this ultrasound money. And the fact that ETH becomes ultrasound money gives us all sorts of you know, rippling effects. You know, it means, you know, more security for Ethereum. It means more economic bandwidth. It means all of these other good things. So I think the trade-offs need to be carefully weighted as to whether we want to be, you know, very ad hoc, or just be credibly neutral and reinforce the burn.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm feeling the burn too. I'm feeling the burn. But it's really just an argument that, you know, there are probably multiple ways to skin a horse. I'm not sure if that's not, but there are multiple ways to go about it. And I think that, you know, we definitely need to burn, and we probably are going to want to be doing other things. And in fact, my thought is the most exciting mechanisms are the mechanisms that have sub-mechanisms and sub-mechanisms, like composable things that incentivize really good behavior. So if you said like, okay, if you say like this mechanism, let's say it's the burn, let's say it's something else, has this consequence of, you know, funding innovation, giving back to, you know, people who need it, just like generally like rising bringing everyone up, then that is like that. And those sub mechanisms are all dependent on like you do this burn, and then you like kind of like have this ripple effect of all of these other things happening. That's what I'm interested in. So like if you know, for me to feel the most burn, that's what I would, that's where I really just would love to see. It's like, okay, yeah, you know, that's how you do the burn, and then the whole world's burning. I don't know, in a good way,
Excellent. Thank you, Karl. We don't have any more questions. So I guess we could move on to the next talk.